Okay, we're at time, so let's go ahead and start. Um, who's first?
We are starting with Nova.
Crunch, crunch, crunch. You're gonna see what the story has to do with eating soon. Um, Slurp. He smacks his lips, knowing I hate it when he eats like that. Ugh, little brothers. They all take my appetite away. Mom says I'm getting thin. I say, then tell little brother to stop chewing with his mouth open and not to eat loudly. Finally, peace and quiet. I can finally eat without wanting to throw up. Baby sister vomits and spits out her food. Oh no, not again. Um, Emily sinks to the ground sobbing. Emil leans down and hugs her. Amelie throw Amiel throws himself over Mama's body, doing what looks to be attempting to pretend she's still alive and they're cuddling and everything is still okay. I take a step back, then another, and another. I keep slowly walking backward until they're far enough that they won't be able to grab me and force me to stay. I spin around and run as fast as I can. Finally, I stop and curl up on the ground, and I weep. I cry and I cry until there's nothing left. I am empty. I have been for so long. I joke and pretend to be carefree to spare my friends and family worry. Mama's death has only confirmed I will never put myself back together again. A small crackle sounds above my head. I look up and find a small, pale blue, flickering ball. Quite gracefully, I think. Ribbons spin out from it faster and faster until finally there's an opalescent woman that has a few tints of blue in a few places, and the ball as the pendant of her necklace. And it has to do with eating because 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 um the main character is named Amelie. Um, um, and this has to do with eating because Amelie is going to recognize the woman as the ghost of her mom, and the mom is not going to speak, but is just going to smile and hand Amelie like a piece of food. I'm not sure what she's going to hand Amelie yet, but but then but then Amelie's going to take a little bite and she thinks it's good, so then she eats the whole thing and she feels fixed again. Like now she's going to carry a piece of her mother with her forever.
That's great. That's wonderful. So let me ask you: is the poem and the story, are the poem and the story related, or are that's just two separate writings?
No, two separate writing
Okay.
things because
Okay.
I
Got
wanted
it.
to switch it up a little bit.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, both of them are great. Thanks for sharing them. The first one is kind of funny, and it paints a portrait of the younger brother as a kind of the kind of like
Tiny demon
grotesque.
who always
Yeah,
annoys you.
exactly. Yeah, the kind of grotesque demonic figure that we're talking about in the medieval paintings. Um, and then the way you use food or plan to use food in the second story sounds very interesting as well. You know, other ways that writers and artists have used food are these. The food can be a source of rejuvenation, a source of health. It seems like you're using it in that way a little bit, and also food functions as the catalyst for memory, the catalyst for
What
uh,
does
re- uh,
catalyst mean?
recognition. Oh, the like the jumping off point or the cause of something. Um,
Cause
so
of memory.
so
Oh,
yeah, so so food becomes the thing that kind of sparks memory, um, or conjures memory or something like that. Food in other stories has been used as a kind of poison. So yeah, there's just so many different ways to use food in stories. That's great. Thanks, Nova. Sounds like it's going to be a great story.
Okay, so next up is Lena.
The family eats a symbol of togetherness, laughing, talking. Pass the salt, please. The beggar eats, the only thing he can find, worried, sparing. Maybe I won't starve. The king eats, a feast with the wealthiest of families, gluttonous, greedily. Let us feast. They all eat, the same action, yet differently. What a contrast. And I ask, how has the world come to this?
That's great, Lena. I think that's one of my favorite things that you've read, because it seems so easy. It seems like it came to you so naturally. I wonder if you were, yeah, taking notes during the presentation, writing down observations. It seems like you kind of brought together multiple images across the paintings and the poems that we looked at during the presentation, and you created what seems like um, a very simple poem, very simple images, and yet it has a really important kind of poignant insight at the end of the poem. The subject of that poem is eating itself. You show us lots of images of people eating. There are juxtapositions between families and people who are alone, between the beggar and the king, for example. Then you have moments where voices of figures interject into the poem. Pass the salt, please, for example. Um, so the poem meditates on eating as various forms of eating, and then there is this ambiguous turn at the end of the poem where the poet suddenly says something like, "I wonder why the world is this way," or how does it go?
It was how has the world come to this?
Yeah, how does the world come to this? Yeah, it's even better. Yeah. That's great. And then it's one of those turns that causes you to reconsider the entire poem in light of that ending. So that was really great. I love that poem. It's also not obvious what this is in the last line when you say, "How has the world come to this?" That this is ambiguous enough that it sparks a lot of questions. Yeah, it's very interesting. That's great.
Thanks, Lena. Next up, Ellie will put hers into the chat.
A feast in a grand house. People chat, people eat, but outside a knock is heard. A family is outside the house starving. They gaze inside, seeing food as gold. But in the grand house, people think gems are valuable. Oh, I heard from them that food is junk.
That's great. That's a beautiful poem. These are some great poems that, and in the case of Nova, the story that we're seeing today, I think. And the thing I'm realizing in a lot of these writings is that you're finally starting to carry over the techniques that we've been working on for several weeks in a row. So in this poem, the poem moves around. It's very fast paced. It's very heavy on the imagery. Um, we open the poem in a grand house, a feast. We experience the kind of the energy, maybe the vibrancy of the feast with the chatting and the eating, and then a knock is heard. The poem turns, so you're working in the poetic turn that we discussed over a month ago, and now we're outside of the house with the family looking in. And then the last line, these last lines are really outstanding today. The last line it has a kind of flippancy. It has the tone is both kind of funny and also very poignant. It's also very sad. So yeah, really outstanding poem. And both of the poems now, Lena's and Ellie's, are really strong images, really effective juxtapositions. It's great. It's great stuff.
Thanks, Ellie. Next up is Ethan.
Man, my brother, standing at the table doing what he does best. Sitting on the couch, I can see him stuffing himself full. grabbing any snack and food on the counter and slapping it into his mouth. Sauces and juices cover his face. He looks like a clown. My brother will gain 10 pounds the next day. Promised. What a greedy kid.
I was just gonna say, Audrey. um, now we have had 2 sibling poems for today. I love the first line of this poem, "Man, my brother," because its address is ambiguous. Is the poet saying, "Man, my brother," or "Man, my brother"? So there's something kind of fun about that first line. I love the line, "He looks like a clown," because you've kind of transformed the act of eating not necessarily into a demonic one, but a comedic one. So in other words, eating here is what the clown does. Um, so it's almost like it's like a comedy routine or a comedic act to eat food this way. And just notice the verbs that you use. He's sitting on the couch, so that seems like he's being very passive, but in fact he's being very active. He's sitting, but he's also stuffing, grabbing, and slapping. So those verbs, those very active verbs, contradict the fact that he is sitting. He's in fact very he's like flailing around, grabbing stuff, slapping it around. Um, uh, it's stuffing. There's a kind of energy about him, and I think that is what contributes to the kind of comedy of the scene. That he's both sitting down and somehow like frantically grabbing at foods and throwing them at himself. It's great. It's really great.
Thanks, Ethan. So finishing things off today is Audrey, and stacks of sausages, heaps of hams, we're wallowing in waffles and most excellent eggs, torrents of toast, an ode to oatmeal. Don't cry over the cereal, it'll get soggy. Why, the amount of yogurt makes me want to yodel. And crepes. Are those more crepes?
That last line is so good. Okay, so this is almost the poetic equivalent of of like a feast painting. You know, they used to do these paintings, yeah, particularly in Holland, in the Renaissance and post-Renaissance era. They would paint these just immaculate feasts, no people in them, just really elaborate, decadent tables with really fancy, ornate tablecloths and tons of food: ham, fruit, butter, bread. So I think Audrey's poem is kind of the poetic equivalent of that type of painting, but there's also some irony in it. So it's not, you think maybe it's a kind of celebration of food. It seems to be reveling in the amount of food, the stacks and the heaps. But then you come to a word like wallowing. That's a word that seems ironic given this circumstance. You don't really think about something like wallowing when you're feasting. And then we go back to excellent, but then torrents is a word that has kind of a negative or violent connotation. Ode is a celebratory word. Don't cry over the cereal. This is a nice kind of colloquial interjection into the poem where the poet suddenly seems not to be describing the feast, but actually talking to someone directly. The amount of yogurt makes me want to yodel, also very celebratory, but then, and crepes, are those more crepes? Very funny last line. So there's this kind of back and forth between celebrating the abundance of food and also feeling overwhelmed by it. So it's like there's so much food, but at the same time, there's too much food, you know. And and then yeah, there's something about that last line where the poet almost seems to become so overwhelmed by the food that she cannot even identify it. You know, that's a wonderful little poem. Yeah, Audrey, do you want to say something about it?
So I was considering capitalizing the alliterative like pairs of words like for example, stacks and sausages, but I wasn't sure about that. So like, what would be your opinion of that?
So probably wouldn't do that. If you do that, it would make it seem like you were referring to us like a almost like a branding or like a singular unit of um product. So like just talk about this for example. Like let me put it this way. Stacks of sausages as you have it makes the reader see stacks of sausages. If you wrote capital S stacks of sausages, then it seems like I'm looking at a box that says stacks of sausages. So it transforms them into kind of like a singular unit of things rather than just a description of an abundance of food. So I would leave it uncapitalized. Um, yeah, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. There's another really weird thing about the poem that I love. That says why the amount of yogurt makes me want to yodel. Why? Which is not a question in the rhetorical use of the word why here. It's an exclamation. It's very old school of you. It's great. Yeah, these are really great poems today. I'm very impressed. Also, interesting is that the poems are very short, very condensed, and direct. Very clear images. These are all very good things, I think. And I think the last 3 weeks we've really just seen outstanding writing. And so I think this is evidence that you're all getting better, and that you're using a lot of the techniques, like I said, that we've been talking about the entire course. So this is great. It's great to see. Does anyone else want to share before we go? All right. Well, enjoy eating, and remember the demonic feasters. Thank you all for your poems. I'll see you next week.